Okay, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today for our Master Seller webinar on how to demo Google Apps. My name is Michelle Lisowski. I'm a Partner Marketing Manager for Google Apps, and I'm joined today by Geraldo. Geraldo is one of our sales engineers, and he works with some of our largest customers to sell and demo Google Apps on a daily basis. So he has a lot of great insights to share with us, and he'll be walking you through some tips and tricks for how to demo, and then he'll also be doing a live demo so you can see how he presents Google Apps to customers. Before we get started, I just want to go through a couple of housekeeping items. You'll see on the first slide here the solution provider site, apps.getportal.com. This is a great resource for all of our resellers to go for trainings, marketing, materials, and a lot of other great information. We are recording the webinar, and we're going to be posting the presentation and a recording of the webinar on the apps.getportal.com site by the end of today. So if anyone needs to drop off early, or if you have colleagues that weren't able to attend, you can access the recorded version by the end of today. I also want to call out our next webinar, which is in a couple of weeks. It's on Thursday, October 29th at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And that webinar is going to be on security from the ground up. So we're going to walk you through how we build security into Google Apps, and you're going to be hearing from our Director of Security. And he'll be here to answer all of your questions. We're also going to be taking questions for that webinar via Google Moderator, and we haven't done that before. So when you register for the webinar, you're going to get a link, and you can go to Google Moderator to submit all your questions and vote on the ones that you like best. So for questions today, we're going to be taking them live throughout the webinar. Please be sure you put all questions in the Q&A box in the bottom right corner of your screen. There's a chat box above. Please be sure that you don't put questions in the chat box, but put them in the Q&A box in the bottom right corner. This is going to ensure that Geraldo can see them and try to address them as he goes. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Geraldo.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Michelle. Just checking. I'm good?
You're good?
Great. Everybody, thank you so much for joining the webinar today. Today's session, I'll do a few little PowerPoints to begin with and do a lot of live demoing. And basically the purpose of today's session is to kind of give you a perspective on how some of us like to demo Google Apps. Many of you might be in situations where you're asked to show what Google Apps are from the context of, I've never seen this before. Others might just bump into potential customers and just have customers give you a blank stare around what Google Apps actually are in the delivery method. So I'll take you through how we kind of like to demo Google Apps, and it's not the only way to demo Google Apps, but a few key messages and value propositions I think will be useful for you guys along the way. So it's all about the talking points. So the nature of the Google Apps demo itself is again, kind of a non-technical approach to it. It's something that is best served for someone who's never really used Google Apps before. They might be familiar with the consumer offerings that match the Google Apps offerings, but they might not completely understand what the context is and what the applications are being delivered. So it's good to have sort of a quick to deliver, quick to set up environment where you can just go in there and open up a browser and start showing some of these applications. It really is a lot about the story and the narrative that you interject into the demo itself to just bring it to closure and bring it to the minds of the customer who is actually interested in Google Apps itself. So we'll be focusing on 5 main sections, actually 6 applications. Mail and Talk will be sort of done in one screen. Calendar, Docs, Sites, and Video. Obviously, these match the offerings that we have in Google Apps. And what I like to do is just basically keep that order in the customer's mind by starting with Mail, crafting a message around Mail that leads us into Calendar, ultimately leads us into Docs, Sites, and Video to sort of embrace the entirety of Google Apps from a full-fledged story-like message of value and interest to the customer itself. So keep in mind, what we're going to share today is something that is best delivered if you make it your own. Some of these messages have been crafted by us by trial and error. It's just what resonates and what works well. But ultimately, if it comes from your own personal experience and introducing your narratives and how you approach things, and if you're obviously a Google Apps user, you bring that to the table and make this your own. Even so, a compelling demo is best delivered in under an hour. Sometimes Google Apps takes a long time to get through if you actually focus on every single feature and every single button in there. So what I like to do is I kind of skip through some of these sections in Google Apps and just focus on the things that I know will resonate with customers and pointing out alongside some key value messages. So it keeps it short, and I try to aim it for 40 minutes to give a few seconds, minutes for Q&A and sort of follow-up. Because generally, when you're asked to do a demo, you're given maybe an hour to do the demo. If you can keep it to 40 minutes, an hour is more than fine. And another important thing is a lot of these applications are really nice and cool if you actually have a demo buddy with you. A demo buddy is somebody who is just there for you and talk and there for you in some of the collaboration applications such as Google Docs. So you can actually point out and show how this demo buddy is interacting with you. And even if you have Google Talk, if the person has a little camera, it's a nice way to just show the voice and video chat capabilities, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit louder. Hopefully that'll answer it. If you guys can still not hear me, or if I'm cutting off, please make sure so I can pick up a headset or a handset. But I'm going to keep going. All right, thank you. So one of the things that are very obvious, and are going to be very obvious in some of these aspects, is you want to use a tab browser, simply because it's much easier to go from one tab to another. I mean, surprisingly, people are still out there using Internet Explorer 6, which makes it kind of hard to demo because you have a lot of windows to manage. A tab browser is a must, and almost every browser now has tab browsing capabilities. So, something like Chrome or Firefox, not that we are biased towards Chrome, but they work really well for demoing. Internet Explorer 7, and if you want to be risky, do the Internet Explorer 8. But my point is, if you have a tab browser, just before going into the demo, open as many tabs as you can. From a partner perspective, sometimes you're actually physically at the customer's location, and sometimes you don't have an incredible amount of network connectivity or reliability on your network. Obviously, you want to have some sort of network connectivity, but sometimes you're in a spot where if you take a few minutes before the actual demo to just open the applications that you want, it helps if you bookmark them as a bunch, or if you actually just start clicking and opening them in sort of the order that you want to approach them, then it's kind of nice if you already have those open and they just pop up instantly and immediately. And some prerequisites themselves to just have an environment that's ready for you to demo. It's nice, obviously, if you have content in what you're showing. And I guess the most difficult thing to have content in is your Gmail inbox itself. If you are a Google Apps user in your normal day-to-day and you want to show your own personal inbox, that's probably a really good way to make sure the content that you're showing is fresh. But sometimes you can get into a little bit of confidentiality. You're showing some mails that the customer, you don't want the customer to see. So oftentimes we'll have sort of a demo inbox, an inbox that is on some other Google edition if you don't want to pay for it, but something that you want to keep fresh and have solid in order to demo. I'll be using that paradigm myself. I'll actually be using an inbox on a separate domain, and then I'm actually going to use my own domain for other things like Google Calendar and Google Docs, where I'm actually leveraging the power of Premiere, which is the edition I'm in. But I shift over to an alternate inbox so I don't show any confidential stuff. There's not much else to say. Obviously, you want to keep that content. You want to keep that content fresh for the other applications. So make sure you have calendar items in your calendar. In fact, if you have overlay calendars that you want to show, that's a really good thing. Google Docs at least have 3 documents that are respectable and presentable. And one thing to note is that one of the more compelling documents types that you can show inside Google Docs is spreadsheets. So if you have a really cool spreadsheet, that's really going to help. And especially if you have a demo buddy accessing the spreadsheet, it's a really nice, compelling grounds for showing collaboration. Have a nice Google site, just gas it up, put nice graphics in there, have a Google video embedded. And in Google Video itself, just make sure that there's content in there, something that you can show. Google Video is absolutely one of the easiest things to talk to, but you don't want an empty Google Video session if that's what you're going to show. Ultimately, we talked about the demo buddy. There's not a lot more to say about this demo buddy. It's just somebody, maybe a peer that kind of is at the ready to do a Google Talk session with you, somebody who might have a little camera to actually show. It really takes it to the next level when you actually use voice and video chat. So it's kind of cool and compelling for customers to actually see that live and in real time. And obviously focus on the spreadsheet document itself, because that's really the power of collaboration in a very visual way if you use your demo buddy for that. And now to get to the live part of the demo itself, I'm going to share my application here. So I shifted over to Chrome, where I already have a lot of tabs open, and I generally craft a story that will sort of take me through the scenario in a way where I'm starting with mail. Alongside mail, I'm talking about talk, just because it's there and it's embedded. It's something very easy to do. And from there, I shift to calendar, docs, sites, and video. So you'll see that here. The reason I do that approach is because it's sort of a general approach on all applications, and a general approach that works when you have no context from the customer. It's just, what is it? If you do have context from the customer, say they're interested in video more than mail, there's no reason not to go into video first, right? If there's somebody who are interested in collaboration and docs, there's no reason to actually start and force them through mail and calendar. So make sure that you're flexible enough to adapt the stories and the key messages that you're giving to a general context and a specific context as well. What I'll be doing here is, when I show this, I'm actually speaking to customers from perspective of that I understand the customers are already probably using mail. So a lot of the times I don't go through these applications and explain what they are. I basically refer them to something that they already know. So in the case of mail, which is, again, how I start, I actually say, well, Mr. Customer, you're looking at an inbox. And obviously you know what an inbox is because you use it today. We're not reinventing the wheel, Mr. Customer, I say, with our Google Mail, but we are using some innovative things to help you get through the day. And that actually starts my conversation around those key messages. The first key message I introduce with mail is the concept of finding what you want. So I immediately start showing mail and say, you'll notice, Mr. Customer, Google is a search company. Naturally, there's a search box near the top. It's very easy for me to quickly type something in and search on it. By doing that, you get sub-second response, regardless of your inbox size. Keep in mind, Google Apps Premier gives you 25 gigabytes of inbox. You can get really, really lengthy inbox, but search is always going to be very efficient. So doing search really well inside Gmail allows Google to actually offer some productivity benefits by using search. Not only is search very, very fast, and something you might not be used to today, because in your current application, search might not give you the results you want, but also because of search, I say, Mr. Customer, Google is actually taking and indexing your content and detecting the relationship between some of those mails. So sometimes you send a mail to a person, that person replies, adds somebody else, that second person replies, and you have an actual thread of content that in your normal email is completely separate. In your normal email, you might have several new messages that are related to one another, but interwoven between other conversations that you're having. And as you get through the day, Mr. Customer, you're jumping contextually from one concept to another. So Google knows the relationship between these emails and does a really good effort in summarizing this in what they call a conversation. So you'll notice, Mr. Customer, some of these line items here actually have numbers attached to them. These numbers actually represent different messages that have conversations in them. These are messages that are related to one another. So because of that, it allows you to get through your day in a much easier way by simply making one single click and reading from top to bottom and understanding exactly what the conversation has taken you through, allowing you to reply to the message that you want to reply, allowing you to read the entire thing before replying to it, allowing you to save a lot of time. But many times, there might be 50 messages in one single conversation, and you immediately, by the first, second, or even third message, you understand this is not related to you. You're just there, and you click away. You go back to your inbox, and you've just saved time reading 47 different messages. So it helps you get through the day very, very quickly. So bringing up the concept of conversations is something that ties into the whole search overall message. The other thing I use as a key message is along the paradigm of search, also saying, well, remember, Mr. Customer, I mentioned that now you have 25 gigabytes of space. That mainly means that you can keep your mail almost as long as you wish. You no longer have to delete things because you have to manage your space. 25 gigabytes is a lot of space. But then it introduces an interesting problem of saying, how am I going to organize this content? A lot of the times you use folders to organize the content. these folders serve two purposes mainly. One is for classification. You have a mail, you want to find it later, you put it in a folder. Days, weeks, months later you want to find it, you actually go to the folder and you scroll to find it. Well, the other reason folders exist is to actually keep your inbox clean. A lot of the times you want a clean inbox because that's your approach to mail. If you read something, you classify it. You read something, you classify it, allowing you to keep a clean inbox. Well, because Google has such a robust way of searching your mail, they actually introduce a concept that's a little bit better than folders. This concept is called labels, and that's how I introduce labels themselves. Again, if you have a nice inbox with labels that are just standing out, it's a good way to actually point them out and say, well, I use labels both ways, Mr. Customer. I actually use labels both as a classification method and a way to move messages away from my inbox. You'll notice this is my inbox, and it actually has some tags here. If you think about it, these tags are actually helping me visually identify what these mails represent to me. You'll notice I have a high priority tag, I have a my team tag, I have announcements tag. I can change the colors around in these, but I'm not moving them away from my inbox. However, what these labels are, and I go and I explain, these are still a classification method that can still sort of serve the purpose of folders. If I go over to my left-hand side, I actually can click on any of these labels and just have that label show sort of in a label-only search method. So you'll notice some of these things are still in my inbox, Mr. Customer. Some of these things are not. So it serves the purpose. If I actually move something to the label, archive it, or remove it from my inbox, I've just done a classification method, which is very folder-like. But if I keep it in my inbox, I just adapt it to a classification that is very visual and helps me get through my day. You, in your existing system, might have flags, red flags, blue flags, yellow flags. Sometimes you're like, okay, yellow flags are for medium importance. Blue flags are for customer things. Well, now you actually have something more representative helping you get along. And because of Google's search engine classifying your email, it's very, very easy to go back and find it. If you'll notice, when I click on any of these labels, I'm actually just conducting a search. So if I actually click on something and add a keyword here, I've just narrowed down my search between the actual label classification and even more things that I want. So it's a great way to find what you want using labels and the classification method that ultimately will allow you to hone down and hone into what you want. And ultimately, search really brings things to a closure. Let me tell you a narrative, Mr. Customer. Again, narratives are really a great way to communicate with customers. I don't want to be too obvious. But I use a personal narrative where I'm actually addressing how I used to look for mails. And I go, well, how many times, Mr. Customer, do you click on your columns? Let's say you want to sort. Do you normally do that on your day-to-day? Customer always says, yeah, I do that a lot. I actually click on the name column, they'll mostly say. And then I'll scroll down to the name I want. And once I get to the name I want, I sort of scroll around and look at the date. And within the approximate date that I remember that mail was sent, I'm going to look for a subject line that kind of matches what I think that mail was. So, and the way I address that is I say, Mr. Customer, well, you're actually using 3 points of data, right? You're using the person's name. You kind of remember when that mail was sent. And you kind of remember something about the subject or even the content of the message, but mostly the subject to help you. Now, you approach that by scrolling. Well, the problem is, scrolling works if everything's in the same folder that you're in. And scrolling works if you actually do remember enough about that data to be, pinpoint accuracy, but you're still wasting a lot of time. Let me show you how easy it is, I say, by clicking on Advanced Search Options, giving those 3 points of data, just a name, just a date. I remember this was about 6 months ago, and I remember this being about a project. So those same 3 points of data that you're using to scroll, I just type them in, and I find the mail that I want. By having a mail that I know is going to come up by using those search terms is a really compelling and great way to show the power of search versus the power of scroll. So we're very much about search, and that's why I introduced the paradigm early in the Gmail experience and keep that paradigm. I'm using the key message around search to really show how Gmail enhances finding what you want. So ultimately, I haven't shown every single feature in Gmail because I don't need to. But by doing that, I've already taken the customer through a normal scenario where they're using mail and making it very, very applicable. right? I'm not going to show you every single feature, Mr. Customer. Trust me, they're there. You know, reply all. Those are pretty cool. Before leaving mail, I actually take. Okay, so there's a question about the value proposition about mobility and mobile apps. It actually does come up a lot because a lot of the customers have mobile devices deployed in their organization, so it's actually a very common question. The way I address it is that I actually defer to another session or some offline conversations about the mobile proposition of apps. I'm going to summarize it in a nutshell, but it actually takes a little bit longer time to demo it and show the customer, and obviously you want to have a device. So in a nutshell, what I want to do when I answer about the mobile proposition is taking the paradigm of having these applications be adaptable to a lot of different internet browsers. And by default, that means that any mobile device that has an internet browser will be able to access these applications just in the same way I'm actually using the real OS browser here. Now, specifically, if I know the customer has BlackBerry, if I know the customer is using Windows Mobile, if they're using an iPhone, there are alternate ways of getting data on those devices, which might speak to more, conventional ways of doing it. So if I know they have a BlackBerry, I'll go with the BlackBerry story, talk about the Google connector for BlackBerry Enterprise Server. If they have an iPhone or a Windows mobile device, I'll talk about the Google Sync method where they're using ActiveSync to actually bring mail, calendar, and contacts. If I actually have knowledge in that and I want to bring it to the table, I'll defer to that during this demo and I'll say, let's take that offline. I'm very interested to show you this. There's great value propositions, but ultimately the message is if you have internet, capable mobile device, you will get to your data, period. And that's sort of the value of that. So I am going to move the calendar and just to make sure the interest of time. Unfortunately, I can't see the chat box, so you guys will have to front me. Thank you. Oh, okay. Okay, great. So it actually comes up a lot. The question is, there's an archive button there, Geraldo. What's that doing? Where's it moving it? To be really honest, I hate the name archive here. If I could, I would change the name of that archive button. I'm hovering my mouse over it. It's the first button on the top row. To hide from inbox, because that's actually what it's doing. Inside the Google Mail world, there are several, quote-unquote folders. These are really labels. These are really views. What archive does is it actually moves the mail away from your folder, away from your inbox, and just simply places it somewhere else. If that message has been classified as a label, the label will still remain. If that message has not been classified, then what you do is you actually find it in your all mail. So if you notice, there's actually an all mail link here, and that'll just bring up everything. An inbox is just a limited view of everything in your all mail folder. I'll do an example here. I have Sergey, who is watching the webinar, just send me mail. He very smartly saw the mail here and is interacting live. I'm actually going to take him and I'm going to archive him. So no longer is he in my inbox, but it's still in Gmail. It's still in the 25 gigabytes. If I want to go back to Sergey, I will simply click on all mail, and there he is. Right? I just got a new one from Kevin Henderson. But the point is, you'll notice that Sergey, as opposed to others, does not have the inbox label. So the secret is the inbox is actually a label. If I take Sergey and I move him back to inbox, suddenly the inbox label appears. And guess what? If I actually go to my inbox, he's back. If I classify him with a label, let's see, he's a European project now, and I archive him, well, guess what? I'll be able to access him by clicking on the European projects label and, obviously, my all mail. So hopefully that answers the question. It's a little bit of a view into how Gmail classifies things and the trick we do to make the inbox visible and allowing you to, quote-unquote, archive without really moving it to anywhere else. It's still in your 25 gigabytes. Okay? Yeah. Okay, so the question is, security comes up a lot in these demos, and the answer is yes, it does. security overall comes up whenever we're having a conversation about Google Apps with any customer. I like to keep customers focused on the demo because security can be a very lengthy topic, just like the mobility concept is. So whenever I do approach security or get security questions, I try to defer them to a separate conversation. The general gist of in the nutshell of that, just like I did with the mobile stuff, is security is a top concern for Google. Google security is something that we can talk to in a separate session, but we have a lot of security methods. And depending on the level of NDA that the customer is in our opinion, obviously I'm a Googler, we approach it with different answers and try to drill down on what their concerns are. But the general gist of it is security and privacy come up a lot. Security is the top #1 priority for us, and ultimately we ask a very compelling question around security, and we ask the customer, do you actually think that your environment is more secure than the Google data center? And not to be arrogant in that question, but we're actually saying realistically, you have to understand that nothing is really technically secure. And because we're doing a multi-tiered architecture, we have the capability to do much more secure environments than individual data centers. And it's just the way things would work in a logical scenario. And the privacy is more around legal issues, and it comes up with the fact that Google does not own your data. It's clearly stated and addressed in a very, very simple way. Google does not own your data. There is a privacy clause with every single contract, and you are the owner of your data. Again, privacy and security can be bundled into a separate conversation, but they do come up, and that's kind of the way I defer them. All right, I need to move over to Calendar. We're halfway done, and we're just got through 2 of the 6 applications. Luckily, these go faster. Going into Calendar is interesting because, again, one of the prerequisites is have something to show, have a full calendar, have something that you use. I'm using this is my actual Google Calendar now. For those of you who are smart enough to read the mail at the top, that's my mail. I assume Sergey will now mail me at that new mail. The point is, you want to have something to show. And one of the things I do to get through Calendar quickly is that, just like in mail, I kind of admit that we're not reinventing the wheel in terms of how things work. Mail is mail. You have an inbox, you have classification methods, you have reply all, you have forward. Calendar is the same way. You have the ability to simply create appointments, create meeting requests by inviting other people, and actually just quickly show things around creating a new appointment, how easy it is to just simply go in and edit some of the event details, create some recurrence, add other people to the mail, add resources, et cetera, et cetera. So taking them through without pausing, because the customer knows what this is, but showing them how cool it is inside Calendar is a great way to just get past the, yes, Google Calendar does what you expect it to do. And then that allows you to go into a mode where you're actually saying, but what Google does, in a very similar nature to mail, is they actually just simply take it to the next level. And one of the things Google is good at is that it allows you to collaborate with your peers by creating calendars whose sole purpose is collaboration. Now, right now, I'm looking at my own personal calendar. As you would expect, it's very easy to overlay other calendars on top of mine to actually show other calendars of other people's personal information. But it's also very easy to create my own calendars. So just by clicking on the Create button, I say, Mr. Customer, I have the empowerment to actually create a calendar that I can then share out with a limited number of people. So this purple calendar that I just popped up has its own sharing settings. I can actually add people to this calendar in an individual method. I can actually add groups to this, and I can give them power over this calendar. And ultimately, I've just created a team collaboration calendar without the intervention of anybody in IT. I didn't have to call them up for a group shared calendar. It just simply works. And because of this, I can now share this calendar. Other people can bring that calendar if they have permissions to and overlay it on top of them. So this brings up a very interesting use case where you're collaborating among a team, you're collaborating across a department. You might even be keeping a record of holidays. Here's an example, Columbus Day. I just added a calendar called U.S. Holidays. I don't maintain it. Somebody else does. I don't even have to worry about it. Maybe it's the department administrator, maybe it's the company administrator just coming in. Here's an orange calendar. This orange calendar is actually a calendar where all my flight information and my trip information is stored. Because of this calendar, in a very easy way, I can keep track of my flights. Who maintains this calendar? A third-party service. This is coming from a website, which basically takes your flight information and formats it as a Google Calendar, an ICS-compatible calendar, and I just consume it. So I no longer have to worry about missing flights or actually creating the actual flights in my own personal calendar. I just overlay it. And there's a ton of use cases that come with the ability to just bring other calendars and bring other information and just completely start collaborating with it. And again, tying it into the message that we just said in Google Mail. In Google Mail, we started with search. We sprinkled a little collaboration. And in Calendar, we're talking even more about collaboration. So we're keeping the same thread and the same message and kind of showing that Google isn't necessarily reinventing the wheel, but just making it better, making that next level accessible so people can get through their day faster and collaborate with their peers. I'll pause here to see if there's any questions about Calendar. Okay. So one question is about shared address books in Google Apps. I'm going to interpret the shared address books question as just the ability to have a global address book available to anybody in the organization that they don't have to personally maintain. The answer is yes. With Google Apps Premier Edition, you actually have the ability to have sort of a shared contacts list. We call it shared contacts, and that's something that's maintained by the administrator of the domain. And by default, it can contain everybody who's a user in the domain, and you can add several entries which are outside the domain itself. This actually helps me start typing somebody's name and just bring up results without me having to understand that. So that's sort of a shared address list. I can even start typing names here, which I don't know. So I might know the first few people, and it's smart enough to detect who I talk to the most. But I might have other people coming from my corporate address book, that shared address book, into the list that I'm not maintaining. So that's the way to approach shared addresses. Sharing your own personal address book with somebody else is much more of an export-import process. That's not a use case we see too much. This is the use case we see a lot more, where you have that shared contacts list. Change the, okay, the question is, well, how can we look at certain hours? How can I customize my calendar so it doesn't show me 7 a.m. or 6 a.m.? And it kind of shows me maybe my shift is completely different, and by default, I want to look at something else. By default, Google Calendar will detect what your time is, and it'll try to center the calendar on the time you're actually at. So if you're actually looking at this calendar at 3 a.m., this will be showing more of a 3 a.m. type of view. There is a way to sort of tell Google Calendar what some of your time formats in, what your week starts, what your default view is, but there isn't a way to tell it, I only want to display this time, ignore all the others. So it's a good question, it's a good feature request, and it's something that we don't do today. Okay, question is, how do we bring other calendars in, for example, Yahoo Calendar, and how do we integrate with say, an Outlook calendar itself? We will consume any calendar that's published as ICS. If it's an ICS feed, basically you can give the ICS feed URL to Google Calendar, and you'll have that feed live and overlaid. I'm not very familiar with Yahoo Calendar, but any calendar that would have an ICS format, especially an ICS feed, can be imported here. If it's not a feed, you simply need to import the calendar manually, but it won't be updated automatically. Now, to answer the second part of that question, Outlook and Outlook Calendar, we actually have tools out there that will integrate your Outlook experience with Google Apps. A couple of tools that will do synchronization from the calendar perspective, and a couple of tools, one tool called Google Apps Sync for Microsoft Outlook, which will actually allow you to view your live Google Calendar inside your Outlook. No synchronization, it's just Outlook talking directly to the Google Calendar backend. So that kind of helps if you want Outlook as your main consumer of your Google experience. And there are options out there. You'll miss out on some of the cool features, but it'll allow you to get through your day and work on that. If you wanted to export an Outlook calendar and put it into Google Calendar, as long as, again, you export it through ICS, yeah, you'll be able to do that. And ultimately, I think Outlook 2007 consumes ICS feeds, so every Google Calendar is an ICS feed as well. So finally, that's sort of the gist of how to approach those collaboration methods. One more question, okay? All right, tripit.com, TRIPIT.com. I just plugged them without receiving any money. But they're a free service, and I like it. So tripit.com. It's not a Google service. I need to make that caveat. Okay? All right. So moving on. We were sprinkling collaboration, reinforcing collaboration in Google Calendar, and now moving on to Google Docs. It is all about collaboration. Again, I'm going to skip over the obvious parts, what Google Docs is, the online way to edit word processing, spreadsheets, presentation type files, and just go into saying, these are the messages that I use. It's all about real-time collaboration. Some of the documents that I use to express how nice it formats it, and I will phrase this with, I obviously be very honest with the customer and say, I mean, there's things you can't do in Google Docs yet that you might be able to do in the typical desktop-based applications, and we're fairly sure. But the collaboration capabilities of Google Docs itself are more than enough to help you get through what you need to do in a very, very fast way. I normally pause on a spreadsheets document. If I have a demo buddy, the buddy is now then navigating inside this document, and people will see him moving around in real time. Right now I have no friends, so you can't see that in my example here, but normally if you do have a demo buddy, it's kind of a cool way to see that and show collaboration in real time. It's very, very compelling. We've always gotten really good feedback on this. Ultimately, by introducing the real-time collaboration paradigm, we're able to deliver a couple of key messages that are very, very compelling. Number one is no more waiting. Even the best current document management, document sharing solutions have you waiting with a shared document because somebody will check the document out and be working on it, and you have 15 minutes free to add something, but you have to wait. Or if you don't have any document management software, you're emailing a document back and forth, which is even worse. Anybody can tell you the compelling arguments to having one single source of truth. So ultimately, the paradigm takes that to the next level by saying, you need to edit the document, you edit the document, period. Just go to it, work on it, doesn't matter who's in it. You'll be editing the single source of truth, and you're done. No more waiting. And the second key message is that because of the single source of truth, because of the ease in sharing, it's also very, very easy just to keep track of things. And using, again, the search box to find what you want and the classification methods, which are very, very similar to mail. You classify what you want, you work online, and if you needed to have compatibility with somebody who does not have Google Docs, a message is you can keep the collaboration and then ultimately export in whatever format you want. So you're keeping the transportability of the document live, and you're also making sure that you're collaborating on it. So a good use case is, hey, let's get to work. Let's put 5 people in this document. Let's get it done. It's done. All right, I'm exporting it in PDF. I'm exporting it in Excel, and I'm sending it to somebody who might not have Google Docs. So I'm keeping that flow happening and just ultimately really using the power of collaboration in Google Docs. So questions? Docs? Okay. Okay. So a common question actually is, hey, wait a second. So how robust is this? You know, I noticed the customer might say, I've played around with this, and I lose my footers and my headers and my backgrounds and my 3D. But what do I do? The reality of it is, there is and there are some current gaps between formatting, especially around things like the word processing docs, which are lost when moving over to Google Docs. Google Docs' primary nature is collaboration. Even though we're working on, and we will keep working on closing those gaps, you will find some gaps. The way I address that is being very honest and saying, there's things that Google Docs doesn't do. A lot of this has to do with the nature of the browser itself. A lot of this has to do with just the power of the desktop applications because they're dedicated. And ultimately admitting that maybe Google Docs might not be a good replacement for every single instance of Microsoft Office. But it's a good opportunity to see there's a lot of things that Google Docs do. And even if you remove those real specialty formats, there's still people who will be very, very well served by the collaborative nature of this. And even in some cases, being able to replace, their desktop applications with this. So by being very honest and admitting there's some gaps and helping a customer understand that if they use it and they test it out, they can determine who needs Google Docs or can use Google Docs and who still needs their traditional desktop applications, they can make an honest choice of saying, well, I'm going to replace 50%, and I'm going to keep 50%. I'm still saving some money. It's still very useful. And I'm actually going to use it across the board to collaborate, and then I'll have people export it and put the final finishing touches in the actual desktop applications before finalizing the document. So letting the customer understand, yes, gaps. You can still have the best of both worlds. And ultimately, if you need to flesh it out and you need to add a trim to it and that Google Docs doesn't allow you to, then you can still have that. Okay. Question on limits then. What's the limit on upload? We're very clear when you actually click on the upload button what the limit is in terms of some of these uploads. So these limits are basically expressed in terms of size of the original document. The reason those limits is really a limitation on the browser itself, not during the upload process, but ultimately during the display process. So even if we can consume large documents, ultimately presenting all those large documents in the browser memory space is going to really hamper your experience with the use of Google Docs by editing. So those limits are expressed, and I mean, I won't be redundant, but if you click on the upload button in Google Docs, you'll get to a place where you actually see those limits. Some limits are smaller, some limits are larger, and it has to do with the nature of the document itself after it's been converted. But we are striving our best to figure out workarounds without introducing things like Flash or Silverlight or any specialized things to compensate over browsers, because we want you to be able to open up any browser, even on your mobile device, and start working on these things. So by minimizing the dependence on anything funky, we're trying our best to raise those limits in Google Docs as best we can. So the question is, what's the best solution for somebody who wants to keep their data on their hard drive? The best solution is don't. I mean, there are a lot of benefits to cloud computing itself where if I get that question, I'm going to try to convince the customer that, hey, try not to, right? Think about the reasons you want to store something locally. The top #1 reason is having offline access to these documents. Now, Google Docs has the capability to go offline. And I show them this capability to go offline and say, listen, if what you're worried about is access to these documents while offline, here's a solution. Just take it offline, make sure you have Google Gears, and you will have these documents offline. Technically, they're on your hard drive, but it removes all the cons of actually keeping your documents offline by still keeping a replica in the cloud. So, I mean, the problem with keeping things on your hard drive is that one day the hard drive is going to die. It's inevitable. The hard drive is going to die. IT nightmare by managing all these things that are disparate hard drives, the really hassle in backing that up, and just the face of terror when your laptop won't boot, that you've now lost access to all your documents, are all removed if you go with a structure where you're keeping things online. I probably can't make a good case for saying do not keep them online and keep them local, so I would address that by trying to convince a customer of the benefits of keeping them online. Okay, so good question about make it easier for us to upload, because I hate going to the web and clicking on the upload button and then browsing and then uploading and then waiting and then having it converted. We hear that. We hear that. There's not too much I can reveal in this conversation, but it's something we are very, very concerned with. So I'm going to going to keep moving. Obviously, our docs experience is going to get better as time moves on. But in the interest of time, I am going to just go to Sites and jump over. So Google Sites is a great thing to actually, if you're showing the entire Google Apps suite, you want to leave it at the end. Not the last thing that you want to show, but close to the last thing you want to show. The reason is that Google Sites is really compelling when you start talking about how easy it is to bring information from different sources into one single web-based collaboration scenario. And just like other competing products, the concept of collaborating by using a web page, an easy to design and easy to use, a user-friendly creation method web page isn't new. We're not reinventing the wheel. But Google Sites is very, very compelling in the sense that if you're using other solutions like Google Calendar and Google Docs and Google Video, it's almost a no-brainer to use Google Sites to bring that in because it's just so easy to do. If you're familiar with the Google Gadget Framework, it's almost all a no-brainer to use Google Sites because it's so easy and compelling to bring other gadgets, public gadgets, private gadgets, even data coming from inside your firewall is very easy to put here. Now, normally, to be honest, depending on the customer will already have an existing web-based collaboration solution, or they might not. Obviously, it's easier if they don't have because they need a web-based collaboration solution, and Google Sites is a great answer to that. It's included in Google Apps. But if they already have a web-based collaboration, it kind of brings up, so why should I have both? Won't it be confusing? And the answer is, Mr. Customer, always find the right reason to deploy. Just like with Google Docs, we're not asking you to replace, but make them work together. And the Gadget Framework is a great way to have the information flow from one place to another. The Gadget Framework mostly is HTML embeddable as well. So just have that coming in and coming out is a good way to talk about it. And one last use case which I found compelling with customers is I mentioned how easy it is to use Google Sites to collaborate with external parties and external entities. If you think about your normal collaborative solutions, and you want to collaborate with somebody who's outside your domain, outside your firewall, you kind of have to go through lengths to maintain a directory outside with their users and passwords, which they don't control. You have to maintain, and the more vendors / partners / collaborators outside of your domain you have, the more maintenance you have to put into this. Well, Google makes it easy. All you do is you add that person's email. And when sharing that person's email, Google takes care of the rest. That email hasn't been registered with Google, we take the user through a registration process. Once that's done, they have access to any Google resource under that identity. It's a very easy and compelling thing to do, and it works really well in external collaboration environments. And obviously, because of the prerequisites, it's nice to have a nice, compelling site. You know, I'm sure you guys can do a much better job than I did in this Google site. I'm definitely not a graphic designer, even though I'm using a Mac. That doesn't make me a graphic designer by far. But ultimately, just have a good site that you can show, a compelling site where you can show different things like obviously customized lists, show embedded docs and show embedded sheets. An embedded form is a good thing to have. And just, you know, video and calendar always pop up. So taking them through that kind of resonates and lets the customer understand, oh, that's what I'm doing. I'm bringing information into one single point, still following the collaboration method. Right, nice. I can use this as a dashboard. This is good. And then ultimately, I'm going to keep going to Google Video and then pause for some last questions. Google Video, again, it's very easy to talk to. I use a single phrase which kind of explains it all. I always say, oh, this is kind of like YouTube for your enterprise, Mr. Customer. And they, oh, I know what YouTube is. I know what my enterprise is. That makes sense. So clarifying that Google Video is only for your enterprise. You cannot put a video here and make it public. You actually need to sign in with your domain account, a domain account, to actually look at this video. Then you start talking about some use cases and say, well, corporate communications are a great use case, samples on your newest products, training. A lot of things can be used inside Google Video. It's contained and stored by Google, streamed through the same way that that you would expect something to be streamed in YouTube. And with the advantage that because it's yours, we allow you to download the video. So when you upload something to Google Video, you actually can optionally, the owner can decide to allow downloads. All the user has to do is click on it, save it to their hard drive, synchronize it to their mobile device. Now they've taken it with them if they need to. But basically, the gist of video is very easy to talk to, and it fleshes out the collaboration message that we're taking through doc sites and video. And ultimately, going back to video, you can say any of these videos can be embeddable and embedded into Google Sites as well. So that kind of finalizes the whole demo walkthrough. Again, we saw a demo where I took you through some of the value propositions and some of the key messages which we've heard resonate across the board. And we kind of just basically took you from point A to point B, not showing every single detail and every single feature, but rather focusing on a message. And if you keep coming up with that message and sort of coming up for air and say, oh, sharing and searching, oh, collaboration, you keep the customer sort of focused in how they would benefit on their day-to-day basis by simply using Google Apps. And of course, these conversations are separate from anything that has to do with TCO, which is always a compelling conversation to have. This is more of a usability, comfort level type of conversation. The end of it all is if the customer can walk away from this saying, oh, this is kind of cool. This makes sense. I want this. Then you've done a good job demoing Google Apps, we believe. So I'm going to take some last questions, Michelle, if there are any. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so the question is, Google Video, external site, how does that work? Well, Google Video, the Google Apps video, I'm going to be very clear that the version in Apps is not meant for anonymous access. And that's very important to note because you would not use Google Video to share something that's going to go on an external, anonymous, authenticated site. If you wanted to do that, you would need the viewers to authenticate against the domain the video is hosted in. So it's a very, very, very clear thing that needs to be honestly said up front whenever you're demoing Google Video, that this solution is meant for internal consumption videos only. It's not a good solution for external collaboration. I would probably say YouTube and the YouTube channel is something that would best serve for external anonymous video. And obviously you can embed these external videos into any website that you want. The question is, Google Sites, can I have page-level permissions? You cannot yet, and I can't say any more. Okay, so a question back to the calendar about public calendars. How do I make my calendar public, and how do I share it out publicly? Well, every calendar that you own, actually every calendar in Google Calendar is an ICS feed, like I was specifying before. And it's a very simple thing to actually go into the permissions of that Google Calendar and make it public. So it's a checkbox to make it public, and you actually get a few links that represent the ICS feed URL, which if you wanted to share out with anybody else, you just give them that URL. And they take that URL, copy-paste it into their own Google Calendar or Outlook 2007 or anything else like Apple iCal, and just consume that iCal feed, and you're good to go. So you just made a public calendar, you just exposed it, you just shared it to the world, and you have people consuming it, period. Oh, good question. The question is, all right, so Geraldo, you talked about the individual doc limits when uploading, but what about the overall limit? How many documents what size can they be, and will I ever have a limit? I'm going to state this as bluntly as possible. There is no current limit to the overall storage in Google Docs, and that's all I can say. There, yeah, I'll paraphrase. Okay, so there's an incoming question, and I'll rephrase it because my partner here doesn't know Mike. We're too cheap to get him. The question is, well, what would be different between doing this live in front of an audience and doing something like a webinar? Obviously, one of the bigger differences is that the format changes completely, right? If you're doing a webinar, it really totally completely helps having somebody else field questions for you like I'm having, because people will ask a question and you won't get to it. And normally when you do webinars, especially when you do live webinars when you're actually showing an application like I am, you get to miss questions easily. You don't have the little screen that shows up questions, and this is true of most, webinar delivery methods like WebEx, which we're using, a live meeting. It's just very hard to keep tabs of that. So for webinars, have somebody there. If that somebody can also be your demo buddy, boom, you got it. In terms of content and messaging, I would say there's very little difference. You want to have that message crafted. You want to use your same demo environment that you would use live. But it's just how you deliver it and how you field questions that basically changes. Now, again, I've presented for lots of years, and I've learned that when you're in front of an audience, there's a lot of things that are happening that you can detect visually, like body language. I won't get into the details, but obviously when you're in front of a live audience, make sure you're looking at the audience and understanding, if they're falling asleep, if you need to speed up, etc. But that being said, it's pretty similar in terms of messaging. Very welcome.
Hello?